بنده همون رو به چشم مشاهده تسلیحات بازدارنده
I'm Leticia Castro, and you're watching the South Air Report. Coming up on the show, new understandings between the U.S. and Iran during nuclear talks, all while the Muslim world prepares for Ramadan, coinciding this year with the Christian observance of Lent. Pakistan and India are shifting their focus to artificial intelligence, while the UK announces new rules for dual citizens. All this and more coming up right here at South Air Network. Thank you for joining us. We kick things off today with a delicate diplomatic moment unfolding alongside rising military tensions. U.S. officials say progress was made during a second round of nuclear talks with Iran in Geneva, but both sides say there are still issues to be resolved. Meanwhile, Iran and Russia are embarking on Navy drills in the Sea of Oman. They come just one day after Iran's Revolutionary Guard conducted similar exercises in the Strait of Hormuz. So to understand what this might really mean, we're joined by immigration lawyer and Free Iran activist Leila Mansouri, who's in Washington, D.C. Leila, thank you so much for joining us today. We're seeing what appears to be diplomatic progress in Geneva, while at the same time, Iran is conducting these high-profile naval drills with Russia. So are these parallel tracks part of a calculated strategy by Tehran, and how should we interpret this mix of negotiations and military signaling? Leila?
Oh,
yes,
I just heard you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. So we'll ask you again. If you heard my question?
Please do.
Yeah. So we'll ask you
again. I only
again.
heard the end of it.
Wonderful. That's completely fine. So is this progress, or do you think that they're calculating it, Tehran is calculating this, or how should we interpret this mix of negotiations from both sides?
Well, as someone of Iranian heritage, I know how this government works. And you cannot trust anything. Even when they had a deal 10 years ago, they were acting in bad faith by arming and funding proxies and, violating different terms of the deal. So you cannot trust anything that they say, and there cannot be a deal with the Islamic regime that's occupying Iran. 85% or more of the population of Iran, inside and outside, do not want this regime any longer. They do not want a deal unless there is some kind of deal where Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, dictator, agrees to free elections and a constitutional assembly where people can freely run for office and change the government. That's the only deal that the U.S. should be putting on the table at this point. Anything else is just lies. You can sign a deal with the Ayatollahs, but they're just going to keep doing everything they want to do in the end.
I understand definitely how you're feeling, but do you think that this strengthens Iran's leverage at the negotiation table, or does it make more of a risk when undermining trust with the U.S. and its allies? What do you think?
No, I think Iran is at its weakest point right now. And the drills that you see with Russia, those have been pre-planned 9 months ago. And those are drills to practice rescue operations and to fight piracy. And those have been going on since 2018. I don't think Russia is involved, and I don't think they're interested in helping the Ayatollah at this time. Their proxies have been weakened, and the U.S. is bringing more and more military might to the region. So if anything, the U.S. has the upper hand right now.
I see. So what specific thing will you be watching for in the next round of talks that will tell you whether this is serious diplomacy or just theater or something that might hinder in the end? What is your hope coming up?
The only thing that the Iranian regime has is its missiles capabilities. And if they want to talk about somehow disarming their missiles, then perhaps that will be a serious diplomatic talk. But I don't know how the U.S. could curtail, how they could do that unless they were able to send investigators into the country to do that, which we know that Iran probably would not allow that.
If you had to put a probability on a deal getting done, going through, what are the realistic odds from your perspective, and what's the single biggest obstacle standing in the way, in your opinion?
Well, there are many obstacles. The Iranian people do not want a deal. I would say the neighboring countries, although they might seem to be aligned with the Islamic Republic because they don't want war, they don't like this regime either. So I think that there's probably an 80% chance that there is no deal. And there's many reasons why you cannot trust them. The region doesn't want to keep these mullahs in power anymore, as is evidenced from the European Union recently designating the IRGC Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And slowly, I hope that other countries align and cut off all of the arteries of this regime. And the people inside Iran now, I can't speak for 90 million people, but I have a lot of family inside Iran.
Yeah.
And they're all looking up to the skies and waiting for other outside powers to weaken this regime and rescue them. They are a nation held hostage right now. And there's already foreign intervention in Iran because there are militias being brought in from Iraq, Hezbollah, and small elements from Afghanistan and so on, helping the regime to commit massacres. And I just wanted to make a note that they have killed over 40,000 unarmed civilians just last month. How can you do a deal with a regime that kills its own people?
I completely understand where you're coming from, mentioning that you have family and friends who live there. And from your own personal experiences as an activist, what would be your message for the people of Iran and for the people like you in the diaspora?
We're not going to give up until we can take our country back. And the people in Iran are really, really have lost hope. They're executing hundreds of people every day. I have lawyers inside Iran sending me the certificates of execution for innocent protesters. Some of them are as young as 14 years old. So I don't know what to say other than just don't lose hope. And the diaspora will keep fighting and being your voice. There were over 1 million Iranians worldwide protesting last Saturday.
Thank you so much, Leila. Thank you for being a voice for your people.
And by the way,
Yes.
by me speaking out, I risk my family in Iran being harassed. And I can no longer visit Iran because I speak out against them.
Definitely a sensible but very necessary topic to cover. We thank you so much for using your voice and for coming on South Air Network.
Thank you so much for being our voice and bringing me.
Thank you. Thank you for your perspective and for telling with us and sharing a bit of your story here at South Air Network. We continue with more information from high-stakes diplomacy, those heartfelt stories to the world of cinema. The spotlight now shifts to Europe, where the Berlin International Film Festival is bringing together filmmakers and stars from around the globe. And many South Asian films are being featured, including a screening from Pradeep Krishan's 1989 cult film entitled In Which Annie Gives It Those Ones. This film stars Arundhati Roy, who is actually in the news for a completely different reason. She withdrew from the festival over the jury's refusal to comment on Gaza. The Booker Prize-winning writer has been vocal on Israel's genocide of the Palestinians since October 2023, and she's not alone. At least 180 artists have spoken out in regards to this, including Tilda Swinton, Javier Bardem, and Brian Cox. They have signaled an open letter demanding the festival take a clear stance on Israel's war in Gaza. So to discuss the politics of this, we're joined by James Jackson, who is a journalist and public policy analyst. He actually joins us directly from Berlin. Good to have you with us, James. Before we talk about Arundhati Roy's stands, can you explain to our audience here at South Era Network why the Berlinale International Film Festival is so important? Thank you. We can hear you, James. Welcome.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I want to know, why is this film festival so important? Why is it on the spotlight right now? If we can give a little bit of a brief history to our audience here at South Era Network.
Sure. So the Berlinale Film Festival is one of the biggest film festivals in the world, behind Cannes and Venice, but it was always known as a great place for industry insiders to network, and it always had a bit more of a political side to it than Cannes and Venice or Sundance. But I think that's been sort of lost or got trapped this time round.
But it's back on the spotlight just because of that. So we're talking about this situation with so many artists coming forward and speaking about certain situations that are now more taking a political stance now against in Gaza, for example. How significant is it that such a large number of prominent filmmakers are publicly criticizing the film festival?
Yes, I do think it's significant. I think what the filmmakers have said is that it's quite hypocritical because, for example, this year, the jury president, Wim Wenders, said, who's a legendary German director, he said, you know, we aren't here to get political, we're the counterweight to politics. But just a few years ago, he said that every film is political. And the jury, the organization themselves actually came out to defend him and say, you know, actors don't have to have a position on every single conflict in the world. But a large number of filmmakers have expressed their anger at these statements and pointed out it's double standards, because just a few years ago they had Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky opening the festival. So it was an extremely political act. But when we're talking about Gaza, Palestine, these are very taboo topics in Germany and with the German state and the German elite. And the German state actually co-funds this festival. There was a scandal a couple of years ago when an Israeli-Palestinian film about settler violence in the West Bank won a very major prize, the Golden Bear, the top prize at the Berlin Film Festival. And there was clearly pressure, a lot of people have speculated, from the government that there shouldn't be any kind of pro-Palestine content, any content about Israel and what is widely seen by experts as their crimes. So really, I think it's a case of hypocrisy. Actors telling people how to feel when it's convenient, telling them what to think, but not being willing to step up. That, of course, doesn't apply to actors like Javier Bardem or the writer Arundhati Roy, who probably interests your audience.
Yeah, and she's so outspoken about so many different causes. Now, the letter points to different responses from the festival to other conflicts, like you mentioned, Ukraine. How does that affect perceptions of fairness and consistency? And could this controversy impact the Berlinale's reputation and its relationship with filmmakers and the global film community moving forward?
I absolutely think that the Berlinale's reputation has been seriously damaged by this, because rather than being a top-tier commercial film festival or artistic, it was always known as a bit more political. And it looks like the organizers threw that away to keep the government happy. I mean, we don't know for certain, but that's what a lot of people are saying. People have commented that Wim Wenders looks like he had a political commissar with a sniper rifle aiming at him. Of course, exaggerating with that, but I don't remember a single time that a film festival has had such a blamage, such a serious loss of reputation within one festival because of a number of choices by senior officials.
I see. What are people in Germany saying? I want to know where you are in Berlin. How are people receiving all the situation that's happening?
As I've said, it's a controversial topic, talking about Israel and Gaza in Germany. Much of the mainstream media have been blaming the independent journalist Thilo Jung, who asked the questions about, is film political? Why are you in solidarity with Iran but not with the people of Gaza, and so on. They're calling him an activist, and even one film journalist asked for his accreditation to be taken away because he hadn't reviewed enough films. I mean, this is journalism. You get the world talking about it. I think it's pretty absurd to say that we're not allowed to ask questions as journalists. How people feel about it may depend on their political views. I mean, on the one hand, I understand the view that actors and directors don't have to have a view on every conflict in the world. Of course, the Eva Puczynska, the film producer, she said, there's a lot of conflicts going on. For example, there's the war in Senegal. There is no war in Senegal. I think she meant Sudan. But what it looks like is hypocrisy from prominent people who have spent years lecturing others about the importance of whatever their pet cause was. And as soon as it got inconvenient for them, they've decided, oh, actually, art is unpolitical. I'm just an artist. It's hypocrisy. And people are seeing that, whatever you think about Palestine or other political issues.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, James Jackson, joining us directly from Berlin, where even as the film industry gathers for one of the world's most prestigious cinema events, global politics remains very much in focus. Thank you again, James, for your insight and perspective on this topic.
Thanks for having me.
And from international diplomacy to a powerful moment of faith unfolding across continents, two of the world's largest religions are entering their most sacred seasons in a rare alignment on the calendar. Over the next few days, more than 1.8 billion Muslims will begin observing Ramadan, a month of fasting, prayer, and spiritual renewal. At the same time, millions of Christians are already marking Lent, the solemn period leading up to Easter's. Hunayn Amin reports on what this convergence means for communities around the world.
For the next month, nearly 2 billion people will change how and when they eat because Ramadan begins this week. Across the world, more than 1.8 billion people will fast daily from dawn to sunset. No food, no drink, focusing on prayer, charity and reflection. And the length of the fast depends entirely on geography. In cities like Karachi, Delhi or Dhaka, it's usually about 13 to 14 hours. In far northern regions, it can stretch past 16 hours. At almost the same time, millions of Christians are also observing Lent, a 40-day season before Easter focused on repentance, restraint, and spiritual renewal. But the fasting works differently. Ramadan means no eating or drinking at all during daylight hours. Lent usually means giving up certain foods, reducing luxuries, or fasting on selected days. After sunset, Ramadan nights transform cities. Food streets fill the spaces. Mosques overflow with late prayers. Families gather, charities distribute meals, and daily routines shift. Across Lent, churches hold extra services, communities organize outreach, and believers simplify their diets and habits for the season. Different rituals, different calendars, but for a rare overlap this year, hundreds of millions of Muslims and Christians are fasting, reflecting, and searching for salvation at the same time.
Thank you, Hunayn. From faith and reflection across continents to the future of technology and innovation, the India AI Impact Summit is now underway in New Delhi, bringing together global leaders and tech pioneers to shape the next chapter of artificial intelligence. Earlier, my colleague Sahil Mengani spoke to Prasanto Roy, a Delhi-based senior tech advisor, about what this summit means for the entire region.
India is taking center stage in the global artificial intelligence revolution with the India AI Impact Summit. World leaders, ministers, and top technology pioneers have gathered to shape the future of AI. The summit highlights India's growing role as a key force in global AI innovation and governance. And with me now from New Delhi is Prasanto Roy. He's a senior tech advisor to several global tech firms. Mr. Roy, hello to you. First of all, what I want to understand from you is how significant is this summit for India and also for its role in the global AI space?
Thanks very much. This is a very significant moment for India. India has been leveraging these positions of global leadership in platforms like the G20 as an instrument of geopolitical leverage. In this case, India wants to set its anchor and the stake in the ground as a kind of leadership and voice of the global south on digital issues. Now, India is already fairly advanced, very, very advanced, ahead of pretty much any country in the world on digital public infrastructure, but not on AI. AI, we are behind the curve on foundational models, on frontier AI. But what India is seeking to do with this is kind of say that this is the largest AI adoption market in the world.
You're right about limitations, and it's so interesting that you mentioned that because I wanted to talk about that. For instance, last year, I wanted to work on an AI project with an American university. And we tried everywhere, all across India, in IITs and top institutions, and we couldn't find something as basic as availability of GPUs. And we had to travel with all our team all the way to the US to ensure the execution of that project. Do you think that's still a hindrance despite all these tall promises?
It is a hindrance. What India has sought to do is set up an India AI mission, which is a few years into the curve now. There is a certain budget of 10,000 crore. The idea is to help get a lot of GPUs and make it available to companies like, Sarvan AI and others who are doing work in AI applications or LLMs or whatever. So our potential of, a billion plus internet users, a million engineering graduates, etc. We are yet to really leverage that in terms of access to foundational technologies, which would really get us to leapfrog. So that limitation is probably going to be a limitation affecting our ability to get into fly.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't really affect our ability to look at AI adoption. A lot of AI applications. So there's a tremendous AI applications which are happening here. Arguably, a lot of it with global, LLMs and foundational models, but there's quite a bit also which is happening with open source sort of models here. However, I think the intent is to try and bypass them with smaller models, lighter models, the kind of thing that China's DeepSeek has done. What we can do without necessarily the most intensive and brute force compute that is there on the planet.
And why only China, Mr. Roy? Even South Korea, I would say, is way ahead. And India's GitHub, you know it better than I do. India's GitHub is brimming with so many tech projects, open source projects. And in that sense, right now, what I want to ask you is, India with this summit is trying to make a big statement. Now, it can have two pathways going ahead. One is that it can be a regional leader where it takes everyone all along, or it could get into a competitive spirit where it's competing with, say, the Middle East players, with partners all around. What do you see as a way ahead, since you give advice to several tech firms as well? Should India play the role of that collaborator, take everyone along? Or do you see India now getting into a competitive space where it wants to assert its dominance as far as AI is concerned?
It's a mix. There is a competitive space in the sense of you are always looking geopolitically at what your plays and how it compares. Just as an example, UPI, is a very, very powerful digital public infrastructure platform. And there is a competitive sense to it because India wants to push it into arenas like cross-border payment against the global platforms which are there. So you could call that kind of competitive. But behind this is the intent to want to shape global narrative.
Right.
We are very, very dependent on big tech, and I think there's a lot of concern about that. There is concern about the strategic autonomy, which can be disrupted by big tech being potentially cut off the way Russian sanctions have had.
Yeah.
So if the US decides to hypothetically decide to extend sanctions, etc. So I think there is a great deal of interest in cementing or accelerating strategic autonomy, and therefore it's in both directions to develop a lot of application models, etc., preferably around open source kind of models which can be replicated and built up here, and then push for and build foundational models which layer on, which leverage the kind of work that we have done in digital public infrastructure. And ultimately, there's a very significant interest in making sure that our strategic autonomy is kind of deepens as we go forward in this journey of some sort of a leadership voice in AI.
So it's going to be a tightrope walk. Finally, Mr. Roy, I believe you are invited to one of the dinner parties today, later at the summit. Help us understand from a common man's point of view, what happens at this summit? How is it actually going to impact common people and businesses in the coming years, not just in India, because at South Era Network, we're also interested at what happens all across South Asia. So what do you think the impact could be?
The impact is potentially massive. So there is, of course, AI being used at every level and layers. AI was being used long before LLMs came in at the back end. Now it's there at the front end every time you search, etc. The simple ability to make search so much useful is, I think, a good example of what it can do in citizen services, in banking, healthcare, government interfaces. We have a huge problem with so many languages, migrants. 1/4 of our 1.4 billion population, they're migrants, which means they move across within the country to a different state whose language they don't really know. So with all this together, there is a lot of potential. There's also the challenges which are being faced in terms of the disruption to jobs in some ways, and making up for those in newer jobs which are emerging.
That conversation, viewers, is going straight to our social media platforms. Mr. Prasunta Roy, thank you so much for helping us put that story into perspective.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Sahil, as well. Meanwhile, Pakistan is also making an ambitious bet on artificial intelligence. The government has announced its plan to invest around $1 billion by 2030 in developing the country's AI ecosystem. And earlier this month, Islamabad even hosted its first major AI summit. Let's take a look.
Pakistan hosted its first major artificial intelligence summit in Islamabad last week. The event, organized by the Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication, brought together government officials, tech leaders, and international delegates at the Jinnah Convention Center. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, in his address, told the audience that AI is no longer a future ambition, but an immediate economic priority.
The government of Pakistan is committed to invest $1 billion in AI by 2030. Which will go a long way in building AI ecosystem in our country. 2, AI curriculum will be introduced not only in all federally controlled or run schools, but also all schools of AJK, that is Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and Gilgit-Baltistan, as well as remote parts of Balochistan, to prepare our youth for leadership and digital economy. 3, we'll provide 1,000 fully funded PhD scholarships in AI to our boys and girls all over the country by 2030 to build a world-class research center fully capacitated. And last but not the least, we will launch a nationwide program to train 1 million non-IT professionals in AI skills, enabling them to enhance productivity and improving livelihoods.
Federal IT Minister Shahzad Fatma Khwaja also used the summit to formally unveil what the government is calling the Islamabad AI Declaration, aimed at promoting a sovereign, inclusive, and outcome-driven AI ecosystem. The policy framework outlines principles such as responsible AI, data protection, and private sector-led innovation. The declaration sets out 8 pillars, including public value, human accountability, safe and explainable AI, and stronger digital infrastructure. This all comes on the heels of the ambitious AI policy launched in July 2025, which promised to position the country to compete in a data-driven global economy. While Pakistan's government insists this marks a shift from policy discussion to real implementation, persistent internet connectivity issues remain a significant hurdle. For a country eager to claim an outsized share of the global AI boom, the true test will be whether the promises made at the Indus AI Week in Islamabad can be turned into solid foundations over the next year.
From innovation and the future of artificial intelligence in Pakistan and all of South Asia to the story shaping our world right now. French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to India is proving to be fruitful, with the Indian government granting preliminary approval to buy more than 100 additional Rafale jets. The purchases are worth around $40 billion. And over in Sri Lanka, after much public pressure, lawmakers have fulfilled a key campaign promise to cut back lawmaker perks, completely scrapping their pensions. So previously, after a 5-year term in office, lawmakers were entitled to a pension for life. Not anymore. And in Afghanistan, the Taliban's chief spokesperson, Zabihullah Mujahid, says Afghans would be prepared to cooperate with Iran if the United States were to attack. So, of course, we transition from today's headlines to a revealing chapter of history. Coming into sharper focus, basically, newly released declassified documents reveal that former U.S. President Richard Nixon secretly offered China U.S. backing if it moved against India during the 1971 war with Pakistan. And as Michael Shaguri reports, the revelations are rewriting what we thought we knew about the birth of Bangladesh.
Years after the Bangladesh Liberation War, newly unsealed U.S. documents are shedding fresh light on how close the Cold War came to reshaping South Asia even further. According to recent reporting by the Times of India, newly released Watergate-era files show that in 1971, President Richard Nixon privately conveyed to Chinese leaders that the United States would support China if it chose to intervene against India during the war with Pakistan. At the time, India was moving toward open military conflict with Pakistan, following Pakistan's brutal crackdown in what was then East Pakistan. The war would eventually lead to the creation of Bangladesh in December 1971. Historical records from the U.S. National Security Archive and the U.S. State Department's Office of the Historian show that Nixon and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger viewed the conflict almost entirely through a Cold War lens. Pakistan was a key U.S. ally, and, crucially, the secret diplomatic channel Washington was using to open relations with China. According to those archives, Nixon feared that an Indian victory would strengthen Soviet influence in South Asia. Privately, the administration hoped Beijing would pressure or deter India, even though China ultimately chose not to intervene militarily. Why does this matter today? Because it reveals how deeply Cold War strategy shaped South Asia's borders, and how the US once leaned on China to counter India's rise. Today, the alignments have flipped. India is now a strategic US partner, China is Washington's main rival, and the legacy of 1971 still shapes regional geopolitics.
Thank you, Michael. Definitely interesting to get this perspective of secret diplomacy and the calculations of world leaders. So now we move on to a story of personal strength that captured global attention. A French woman who became a global symbol of courage and strength. Gisèle Pelicot was drugged and raped repeatedly by her husband and dozens of strangers over nearly a decade. She chose to waive her anonymity and demand the world to watch her story. Her memoir, A Hymn to Life, is out now in 22 languages, but her story raises an uncomfortable question closer to home. Muna Khan reports.
Gisèle Pelicot is finally telling her story. For nearly a decade, her then-husband Dominique drugged her unconscious and invited strangers to rape her in their home in southern France. 51 men were convicted. She could have kept her identity hidden. She chose not to. Now, her memoir, A Hymn to Life, has been published in 22 languages as the first full account from the woman who became a global symbol of courage after one of the most disturbing criminal trials in recent history. She insisted the trial be held in open court so the world could watch. And at the verdict, she said something that traveled around the world. Shame must change sides. That line hits different for a reason, because shame has never sat on the right side in much of South Asia either. In India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, marital rape is still not a crime. The law comes from a British colonial code written in 1860, and it has never been changed. It says in plain language that sex between a husband and his wife is not rape. Full stop. Nepal and Bhutan are the only two countries in South Asia to have criminalized it. In India, the Supreme Court has been asked to rule. It has not. Pellico's case was extreme. 51 perpetrators, almost 10 years, documented on video. But strip it back and you get to a question that is very simple and very uncomfortable. Does marriage mean consent? Forever? Most of South Asia's legal systems still say yes. Pellico says she did not write the book for sympathy. She wrote it to reclaim her own story. I still have faith in people, she writes. Once that was my greatest weakness. Now it is my strength.
Definitely a powerful question to ask, Muna, and a powerful story of personal strength. To new travel rules that affect thousands, it could affect thousands. So if you hold a British passport alongside another nationality, listen up, because pretty soon the rules for entering the United Kingdom are changing, and it could be getting worse. So anything that you do wrong could mean completely missing your flight. British and Irish dual nationals will now be required to enter the UK with a British or Irish passport only, and airlines will be enforcing this at check-in. Stephanie Haddad has more.
If you're British with dual citizenship, you better listen up. From February 25, 2026, showing up at the airport with the wrong passport could literally leave you stranded, even if you've been doing it for years. No cap. For decades, British dual nationals could roll up to the UK using passports from countries like Australia, Canada, or EU states. No stress, no questions. That workaround is dead later this month. Here's the breakdown and what you need to do to avoid travel chaos. Starting February 25, 2026, British and Irish dual nationals must enter the UK using a valid British passport, an Irish passport if eligible, or a foreign passport with a certificate of entitlement COE. And here's the kicker. This isn't just a border check. Airlines will enforce it at check-in. If you don't have the correct document, you don't get a boarding pass. Wait, can I just get an ETA like other travelers? Nope. ETA, electronic travel authorizations, are only for non-British and non-Irish nationals. If you're British, even if you never use your British passport, you can't apply for one. So rocking up with a foreign passport and an ETA, you manage to sneak through the app, you're still getting refused at check-in. This is all because the UK's ETA system is going fully live for visitors from 85 countries. The system needs to separate visitors from citizens automatically. Dual nationals using foreign passports basically break the automated screening, so the Home Office is closing the loophole for good. This is where it gets expensive. British passport renewal, £94.50 online. Certificate of entitlement from abroad, £589, and you need a new one every time your foreign passport expires. Irish passport around £75. This will impact over 1 million people, especially people who haven't renewed their UK passport in years and people who always travel on a foreign passport for convenience. No, the UK still fully recognizes dual nationality. You're not being asked to give up anything, and your rights stay exactly the same. This isn't about your identity, it's about your documentation. If you're traveling to the UK after 25th Feb, renew your British passport or apply for a COE well before you travel. Don't be the person arguing with a gate agent in New York or Sydney while your flight takes off without you. This rule is low-key flying under the radar, and a lot of people are about to get caught out. Share this with your dual national friends. Travel safe, stay informed, and don't let your passport ruin your 2026 plans.
We definitely don't want to keep everybody waiting at the gate if we do face this problem. So good to know. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for explaining it, and for those listening at home in order to avoid those fees. So let's shift gears to end this on a positive note with one of the world's most vibrant celebrations, the Carnival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, held every year in the days leading up to Lent. Carnival has deep roots that trace back to Portuguese colonial traditions, blended over centuries with Afro-Brazilian culture, rhythm, and resilience. So what began as a modest street festivity has grown into what is largely considered the greatest carnival celebration in the world. Over the next several days, millions of people will flood the streets of Rio, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people actually will pack into the iconic Sambadrome as the city transforms into a living, breathing stage of color, music, and movement. According to family and friends that have experienced this live, it truly is a celebration of a lifetime. Unfortunately, I won't be sambaing my way through the streets of Brazil, but I will be here at South Air Network today, tomorrow, and the day after with much more news, much more information from the Global South and beyond. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Leticia Castro, and this was the South Air Report. See you next time.